Hello and welcome to Group 5. Our group has selected the Great Man Theory. Abby will start out by providing you with a development and evolution of the theory, followed by the characteristics of leadership behaviors that align with it. Next, I will share with you leaders from our history that have personified this theory. Sean will then explain environments or situations that can be easily explained by this theory. And finally, Kes will share with you how our theory connects to principles of corporate social responsibility and cross-cultural leadership.
Thank you, Naomi. Hello, everyone. I am Abby Dion, and as Naomi mentioned, I will be discussing the development and evolution of the Great Man Theory, as well as the characteristics of leadership behaviors that align with this theory. To begin with, the Great Man Theory was developed in the 19th century and was formulated with the idea that history can be explained through influences of the great man. The leadership approach emphasizes a charismatic leader, and charisma is known to be a Greek word for the word gift, which we're actually going to come back to here in just a moment. Some of the earliest research on leadership dates back to the 1800s and was focused on traits of great leaders. Those studied were men who were already successful leaders, allowing one to believe that great men were born and not made. Many of those who were considered successful leaders were aristocratic rulers and also those who were in authoritative positions. In both cases, those positions were solely held by men. It was common for a father at that time to pass his position on to his son, who would then take over for him. So people of a lesser social status were often not given an opportunity to obtain such a prestigious position, which also contributed to the idea that leadership was an inherent ability. Also, it's no coincidence that this theory was deemed the Great Man Theory, as opposed to the Great Woman Theory or the Great People Theory, since at that time in history, women were not able to hold influential positions. The Scottish writer and famous historian Thomas Carlyle played a large part in popularizing this theory. Carlyle stated, "The history of the world is but the biography of a great man." He believed that great leaders were a combination of godly motivation and the right personality. Examples of this type of leader who helped contribute to the theory were Abraham Lincoln, Julius Caesar, and Alexander the Great. Naomi's going to talk further about this shortly when she discusses leaders that personify this particular theory. When we discuss the Great Man Theory, there's many assumptions that the theory holds, including the fact that great leaders will arise when there is a great need. During those times of great need, it was almost as if great men would arise almost by magic, as opposed to nowadays having a closer theory likely be that one would appoint the right leader to produce the intended outcome for the situation at hand. Herbert Spencer was one of the first critics of the theory and is responsible really for the shift in mindset for the supporters of Carlyle's Great Man Theory to realize that maybe this wasn't the best theory or the best approach to look at their current leaders. Mr. Spencer was a famous sociologist that said great leaders were produced by the society in which they worked and lived. Essentially, he stated that society was shaping great men to be great leaders, as opposed to Carlyle's theory that great leaders were shaping society. In regards to describing characteristics of leadership behaviors, there's many supporters still nowadays that feel as though a great leader might have an innate ability. They might have an it factor, or they might just have the personality that's right for that particular leadership. Essentially, the characteristics of a great leader would be that somebody was born to lead, in Carlyle's mind or in the theory of Great Man Theory. According to the theory, leadership requires qualities such as a commanding personality, charm, courage, intelligence, and aggressiveness. I appreciate you all listening to this portion of our presentation. I'm going to pass it on to Naomi as she discusses those leaders that personified what this theory meant. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Naomi Conan, and my team members have already shared with you the development and evolution of the great man theory, its characteristic and leadership traits, and the behaviors that align with it. Today, I'm going to share with you some great leaders from our history that personify the great man theory. Great historian Thomas Carlyle often refers to these leaders as gods or heroes. The first leader I'm going to share with you today is Napoleon, who is often referred to as Napoleon the Great. Napoleon was a French military leader and an emperor in the 19th century. Born in 1769 and the second of 8 children, Napoleon excelled at math from a young age on. He later went on to a school in France where he learned to speak the French language. Being 5'6" did not stop Napoleon from attending one of the greatest military academies around. After graduating from this academy, Napoleon rapidly rose through the military ranks and went on to command a French army. In 1799, Napoleon seized political power of France, and in 1804, he named himself emperor. Napoleon wasn't done there. He went on to wage war against many European nations, only to build upon his empire. Now, Carlyle tells us that leaders are born with these traits. They do not learn this along the way. Napoleon exhibits the traits of the great man theory as he excelled from a young age on. The second leader I'm going to share with you is Shakespeare, who was a poet and a playwright. He is often referred to as the poet. Now, unlike Napoleon, not much is known about Shakespeare's childhood. We know that in 1564 he was baptized. During his teenage years, he lived 103 miles outside of London. He came from a large family and was the middle of 6 children. By the age of 18, he had married someone twice his age and moved to London by 1580, where he wrote at least 37 plays. His plays were attended by the most elite socialites in his society. In addition to that, Shakespeare introduced 3,000 words to the English language. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a philosopher, journalist, and poet himself, often spoke very highly of Shakespeare and wrote about him quite often in his journals. He once wrote, "Other men say wise things as well as he, only they say many foolish things, and do not know when they have spoken wisely. He knows the sparkle of a true stone, and puts it where he finds it." What Emerson is trying to say is there are a lot of wise men, but at times they speak foolishly. Not Shakespeare, he says. Thomas Carlyle believes that the history of the world was the combined biography of great men. Emerson thought Shakespeare was one of these great men. The great man theory did not come without criticism. In 1860, Herbert Spencer formulated a counter-argument against the great man theory. He said, great men are products of society, and their actions would not be possible without the social conditions around them. In other words, he said it was society who shaped these leaders. They were not gods. They were not born with these skills and traits. He said that before one can remake society, society must first remake him. Thank you for taking the time for allowing me to share with you some of the great leaders of our history that exhibit the great man theory.
Thank you, Naomi. My name is Sean O'Connell, and my section of the presentation entails great man theory in environments and situations. Both Abby and Naomi have provided us with some wonderful examples of leaders of the past who have had these incredible charismas and traits and qualities that have allowed them to emerge in the course and in the span of history. One of the things about the great man theory, which you've learned, is that leaders are born, they're not made. And so the entire course of humanity, in a sense, could be just the telling of the stories of great leaders that have existed in our time. One of the things that makes great man theory so unique, though, is that environments and situations must play a part in how great man theory even exists and how the theory in itself holds up. Because if we didn't have these tremendous moments in history, if we didn't have a world war, if we didn't have incredible opportunities for literature or for art or for athleticism through different competitions or programs or events, these leaders wouldn't have been in the places that they needed to be to bring forth that leadership quality into the world as we know it. So if you think about environments and situations, and you think about leaders from the past, some of the things that might quickly come to mind is civil rights movement of the 1960s here in the United States. Of course, Martin Luther King Jr. became this incredible, towering leadership figure of the people that looked to him for a sense of hope, conviction, spirit, and understanding of their own situation. And his ability to lead was a direct result of the civil rights movement that emerged. And so you have to ask yourself kind of the question, if the civil rights movement had occurred 50 years sooner than the time that Martin Luther King Jr. lived in, what would his life have been? Would he have just remained a quiet preacher in the southern part of the United States? Would he have gone on to be a leader in some other fashion? We don't know. And that's the keystone, if you think about it, of the great man theory of leadership, is that situations, environments, and timing play a key role in how these leaders emerge and how they are put forth on the human scale, the human platform. And what great man theory shows to all of us and to the world is that the course of human events and the interactions of peoples and countries and cultures and civilizations have this incredible, profound, radical ability to literally create an explosion of people to emerge, to lead, to speak, to write, to think, and come forth at the time that is particularly necessary for them and in that crucial environment or situation. An example from just our own present time might be Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computers. We look at the late Steve Jobs as being this incredible inventor and this man of creativity and certainly of genius who brought something to the market and to the consumer that was unlike anything they had ever seen before, and which is now such an ordinary part of our lives with phones and computers and tablets and the cloud and all of this technology that all of us use on a regular basis. His timing, the timing of Steve Jobs at the moment of technology infusion, boom, whatever you might want to call it, was crucial to him emerging as this leader, as this figure of incredible importance to the United States and, of course, to the world and to technology, computer technology, as we know it. And so that's what makes the great man theory so interesting and kind of unique, is that an environment or situation needs to be present that will bring forth those innate qualities of leadership that come forth from a person, in which great man theory says they're born with, and that they hold within them, ready to literally explode and be unleashed into the human condition, into the world as we know it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marquez Hardy, and I will be discussing the great man theory and how it relates to corporate social responsibility as well as cross-cultural leadership. For starters, the great man theory emphasizes that great leaders possess characteristics or traits not found in the rest of the population. This concept is based on the belief that great leaders are not made but born, meaning that the skills that they possess in regards to making them great leaders is innate. It comes from within. They're already born with it. These are things that cannot be taught or learned. In addition, it allows these individuals, the select few, to rise to the occasion, allow them to have traits such as a calm disposition, meaning they don't get rattled in crazy or very trying times. They're able to sit back, relax, and think logically. Corporate social responsibility is a term that has come to mean whatever a company does to give back to the community in which it has a presence. Sometimes this involves grants, volunteerism, or sponsorship. So being active in the community outreach, doing things with children, or also supporting up-and-coming small businesses. Other times, a company would choose to demonstrate its corporate social responsibility by a commitment to clean energy or some other laudable effort or cause. The Great Man Theory connects with both of these topics because by demonstrating the behavior of social responsibility, corporate is within. You don't learn these things over time. You simply are created with the will which labels you a great man, and that's what Carlyle stated. When it comes to cross-cultural leadership, it has developed it's a way to understand leaders who work in a newly globalized market where they're encompassing the entire world internationally and locally. The Great Man Theory connects with this because it correlates with the born leaders all across different cultures.